Welcome to our podcast, Stepping into Shakespeare, a podcast journey with the Bard. In this podcast, we are talking about how we approach the play Hamlet as actors, what we learn along the way, and we share our experience. I am Therese Duria, a Swiss actress based in the UK.
And I'm Sarah Lynn Dawson, a British actress based in LA. The purpose of this podcast is to document our rehearsal process with reading Hamlet.
Today we're talking with Emmanuel about the characters he is reading. He reads Polonius, Laertes and Guildenstern.
Emmanuel is a very talented American actor with 25 years experience on stage, in front of the camera and behind the microphone, spanning comedy, drama, commercials and video games.
He was born in Bulgaria and schooled in England. He graduated from Stella Adler Conservatory and Shakespeare Lab at the Public Theatre in New York City.
He's based in Los Angeles since 2001, and his notable film credits include Indiana Jones 4, The Other Guys, After We Fell, The Russian Bride, and his TV credits include Pandora, Flaked, Alias, Sex and the City, and Las Vegas. Welcome to our podcast.
Welcome to our podcast.
Thank you. Thanks for having me.
So, how did you first get introduced to Shakespeare?
How did I first get in? Well, besides the fact that we used to watch the BBC productions of Shakespeare, they were great back in those days where I sort of had very little knowledge of Shakespeare. They were great. There was sort of interesting costumes and there were pretty ladies and there was, and then, when you're in England, they also, you have to study Shakespeare. So it was kind of an interesting introduction to Shakespeare. As most things, as you know, if they kind of shove down your throat, you have to do it. Usually it was kind of, why do I have to do it? What's so big about it? So this is the original approach to it. It sort of was a bit of a mandatory also. It was interest. I mean, the language itself brings you in, and then you've heard, I guess, sentences or quotes from Shakespeare everywhere. Now we use them in everyday life. So it's kind of tickles your kind of interest. You go, well, how come? Yeah. It's for 400 years or 500 years, you still have.
So you went to school in the UK, right? That was your...
I did. Some of my school I went to the UK, yes. And then, but I was actually born in Bulgaria. I was born in Bulgaria. And then we moved to London, where I went to school. And then I actually moved back to Bulgaria for a little bit because my mom actually moved. She's originally from Bulgaria. She moved back. So I went there and spent some time before I actually moved to New York when I started studying acting and so on and so forth.
And do you think like Shakespeare was known in Bulgaria at that time? Or...
Yes, I was just thinking, the interesting thing is part of the reason I was so interested in it is because as a foreigner who's actually adopted to let's say a new, say for example, England or, America later on, there are these advantages if you really read Shakespeare in its original language. The rhythm of it, the word association as to what, because he uses very specific words for everything. It's not like he decided to just use really frilly words because it was just the fashion of the time. But he uses these words because when you step back and just listen to the language, these words, it's not, he doesn't deliver an arrow into the bullseye. It's actually an arrow that comes to you from in a very sort of, he imbues you with these ideas.
So it was for you, it was almost a tool to getting more into the language.
It was, yeah, to a great extent. Yeah. You really need to develop your vocabulary, extensively in order for you to know what you're saying.
Absolutely.
Otherwise.
And did you ever felt like you have a language barrier to get into Shakespeare or never?
You know what? Language barrier is a mental block for people. I don't think there isn't a language barrier whatsoever. If you really want to know, you can do it. I mean, the way you learn how to play guitar, it's the same thing. And I, firsthand, I can say that it's just, it doesn't really exist as anything. And if people really believe behind it, they're hiding behind something. That's just not it's not an issue. Granted, some people are really sort of adept to languages, which is helps. But you can really sort of study it. And then, firsthand experience. My mom is very hard of like learning languages. She's, she speaks it, so she's great. I think it's it goes to show that put your mind to it and you're fine.
Yeah, that's awesome. And what was the mandatory? Because I obviously, the same as you, had mandatory Shakespeare plays at school.
Right.
So what was your mandatory play?
Well, I was mandatory play was King Lear, and then we have to always do. We have to always, I think, a lot of times use like you do the big ones, the Hamlet. You have to do the histories as well. They're just really, how should I say? They're just it's a play that you need to pick, but you have to study the big ones, and one of them, of course, is the Hamlet. And you do the Lear. Henry V, I think, is a mandatory. So we have these. It's just it was never. When it's anything's mandatory, as you know, it's very bothersome for you to do it. You go, well,
especially as a teenager.
Yeah, of course. You go, who on earth would use this? Why?
Yeah, but did you kind of had a favorite Shakespeare play then in that time, or did it change over time as well?
Well, favorite Shakespeare play. I didn't at that time. I didn't at that time. It was just Shakespeare. Under the umbrella of Shakespeare, anything went. Favorite play? It's difficult. The comedies, the histories, the tragedies. So I have maybe of the three different genres, maybe one each. But I just say one thing. It's kind of difficult to put your finger on. And that's probably formed lately. It hasn't been with me at all times. But let's say, up to histories, I'm extremely partial to Henry V and Henry IV. There's characters in them that I really love performing to this day. Actually, it's so funny. Sarah had clued me in that you can ask me about a favorite play. So I thought, what do I still remember? And I have to say that after 20 years, I still remember the Henry V monologue, which is we are glad the Dauphin is so pleasant with us. When we have matched our rackets to these bowls, we will in France, by God's grace, play a set shall strike his father's crown into the hazard. So it's one of those things that they stick with you, and it's incredible to have them, and they're just at the back of your mind. And I think it's, apart from anything else, it's because the words are so beautiful that you remember it as a pattern, as a picture, as opposed to remembering it as a fact or a statement. You remember it more as a picture. So I think this is what really sticks. Histories, the tragedy. I would say I'm really divided between Macbeth. I love Macbeth in its sort of the history, the what should I say, the whole play is really incredible, very mystery-like, and I love that play. And from the comedies, I would always go with Twelfth Night.
Yes, me too.
Right. Yes, there's something about it. Two Gentlemen were on a close second, but Twelfth Night is my favorite. It's
brilliant play. We've actually read that, haven't we?
Yes.
But yeah, so you just did the monologue. Who's the character?
This is Henry V. I was extremely impressed by Kenneth Branagh came out that was a long time ago. I think it was 86 or 89, was it? Or maybe it was at 90. No, it was not 86. I'm sorry. It was probably 91, 92, whatever. He came out with Henry V, and he did such a splendid job that, to me, I've seen that movie maybe at least 5 times.
Wow.
Yes, it's just sort of the beauty of the language, and this particular monologue is absolute favorite of mine for the fact that it's very interesting. The challenge of it is the fact that you need to really perform a royal monologue with a person who is very churlish. So put it in Shakespearean terms, because Henry V is basically I should say little rascal that runs around with the bad boys in the beginning until they throw the crown on his head and he has to become a king. So it is one of those things when you sort of when you have to account for it in your presentation and your monologue, and that goes with everything. That's what I wanted to say, is that I think I relate mostly to characters as opposed to plays.
How did you relate to Polonius when you were reading Polonius? What kind of feeling or experience do you have?
The Polonius was wonderful because, I had never, I've read of him, but, you need to really focus on what you do. Otherwise, I feel that a lot of times because of so many plays and so many performances have been of that particular character, I feel a lot of time people sort of tend to find one of these out of the box character sort of shapes, and then they just throw it on stage. It's wonderful. It works. It's stood the test of time. But I'd like to really put my stamp on things the way they're done. And I'd like to kind of form my own opinion. So when you're asking that, I formed my opinion based on the words, what he was saying. I tried not to be influenced by any performances because I've forgotten. Like I've not seen Hamlet in many years. It was just the words themselves really form your opinion, the way he speaks. And then, as I was telling Sarah, I performed it. I think it was just not, I hadn't really tried to, I didn't spend much time on it. So it was just a bit of a suggestion as to which direction I would go if we would just stage it as a play. So I felt that in this particular instance, Polonius was a little bit kind of mumbly. And then,
because you thought he's old. When I was listening to you, I had like an older man in my mind.
Yeah, he's old. Also, he seems to be sort of, he seems very wise. He has these.
He does have some great lines.
Yeah, he seems to be one of these people that sort of, always has this. He's very smart, and he's the king's, consort. So he has these things about him. But the fact that he was forgetting, where was I? So that is a clue. That those are great clues, And when you read the lines, there are great clues about the character. This is why I think Shakespeare's the first one. It was a funny thing. What I was thinking is that Shakespeare's the first one to really develop characters, like really develop characters in terms of how they speak, in terms of most times people turn from mannerisms as well. I mean, lots of these huge actors, it's about mannerism. How do these people, how do they act? What's their mannerism, on stage? And in terms of when you ask what is the favorite plays, I personally feel that, plays are plays. Shakespeare got them from these old Italian plays. He cobbled them together from this play and that play. Oh, isn't it going to sound great? Oh, that's going to be wonderful if this happens. But I think the biggest, what should I say, the biggest, lost words now, contribution that he made is those characters that he created. Leave aside the plot, leave aside everything else. But the way they drive the story through is what I really enjoy. So.
Yeah, it's fascinating. And you guys, I don't know if you know, but I was reading yesterday that Hamlet is based on this old story, I think, about Amleth, who was this legend, and he took the story and he changed it. And so it's really interesting, when you look into his journey as a writer and how he...
Oh, yeah. Yes. I mean, he's back in those days, they didn't have really these the laws that we have now. And, he was able to cobble together things from plays that were actually written. It was the only thing that has more structure were the histories, I think, because they really were loosely based on the history. So that was, those plays are really the ones that you can say, oh, that's himself.
Have you read Polonius before?
I had not, no.
No, it was the first time you interacted with that character.
It was the first time I interacted with the character, yes.
And did you have a line which made a special impression on you, or?
He has this line which is "springes to catch woodcocks." That line actually was repeated by Laertes later on.
No.
Almost the same. He says springes. That was the springe to my own demise or my own doom. He would use a line that later on is. And that gives you this connection, father-son, So it's interesting, it's interesting because, I've no idea if you see that in plays by other people, perhaps you do, maybe Greek plays, but it's just the extremely fine tuning of a play where every single detail sort of links with something else. So this one and the other thing that made impression on me was how because when you read the characters, at least for me, I like to read the characters and see what do they say. I haven't seen it, or purposely I didn't see it. And just let's see what the language brings. You see, the one thing with Shakespeare is you cannot act before or after a line. You have to act on the line. The lines have to give you, the lines actually, it's written so that the line gives you the emotion, gives you the breaks, gives you the the level of performance, everything is in those lines. I went to a very special, just to take it on a tangent, I went to a school after I had done my education at Stella Adler. I went to the Joseph Papp Public Theatre, and they had a Shakespearean program with two people to this day. I remember them, excellent teachers. His name is Randall Duck Kim. He was a New Yorker of Asian origin, beautiful guy, really, really spectacular. They had been dealing with Shakespeare for, I think, for the better half of like 30 years. So they really knew with so many people. They had these workshops, and they had a 2.5 month program at the public theater. And what I got, my first big jump into Shakespeare, was from them, because they really said very important things. There is never any pauses in Shakespeare. The only pause that is given to you is by a full stop. Everything else is a line change, basically an intention change. Like a comma is an intention change. It's not a pause like we would have in a play. Because you need to keep the rhythm going. Shakespeare is extremely and mostly rhythm.
I really love that about Shakespeare, because even if sometimes as an actor, maybe you're unsure about something, or you're kind of like, if you just say the words, it carries you. Do you know what I mean? It's like,
absolutely. Yes,
and it's kind of magic. You're just like, okay.
Just trust it. The one thing about it is trusting it. Trust it and go with it. But it's all about this rhythm that keeps driving behind you, and really, if you step on it, once you drop the rhythm, you really are killing the intention. That's the unfortunate thing with Shakespeare, and that's why Shakespeare is a constant talk. There's a constant talk. There's never any pauses where people are looking at and stuff. Everything is on the lines as the rhythm goes on.
And I think that's why it works really well for what we've done as like a podcast, because when you're listening to it, you're like, you get almost lulled into this like listening vibe, it's really kind of interesting. And I'm like, wow. I didn't notice that before because I always had the visual, but actually removing the visual and just hearing the audio, it makes it something different.
How do you feel reading the Old English? Was that like a challenge for you, or it came naturally to you?
Well, in the beginning, I've actually, the funny thing is that this particular copy of it was very easy, So I've back in those days when I was studying, we used to read the folio. So the folio is the original transcript of the original plays. I think there's a quarto, there's the first folio, and there's also the first quarto and stuff like that. It's right now really is. I'm beginning to forget. I haven't dealt with this in over 20 years, please. These manuscripts were the first one that was transcribed. So they were a little bit hard to read. However, the funny thing is the scholars had come up with directions that I cannot argue with those things, but they would basically infer from the way that some of the words have been written with the way that they were written, like the S, or I think some of the writing, or the way the comma is, or the way the semicolon is, they would infer how the direction of the character goes. So it's very interesting. It's extremely. It's like a Morse code. To see those things and kind of follow them and go, oh my God, that makes such a difference. Because you can read anything. You can read those lines, and if you break the intention, the line is unclear.
Yeah.
That's the one thing with Shakespeare. You have to be like a 110% clear as to what the intention is and how the line goes. Because if you break the line in half, then the intention's gone. And at that point, you kind of go, what was that all about? I have no idea what he said. If you follow the intention, the line is absolutely clear. And that comes back to this thing. It's not a direct arrow into the bullseye. Those arrows come from you because it's like a surround. It imbues you with these ideas that are coming in a roundabout way. It's never direct. It is never, I want to kill you. It's never that way. And Shakespeare never uses that. He would say the line, but in a completely different way for a specific reason.
I think it's interesting as well, like in some of the verses, you get the rhyming couplets like at the end, and then you get one that doesn't rhyme, but that's because like they said it differently back in, in Shakespeare's time, right. And they would say the word a different way, but the way we pronounce it, it's like throws it off a little, and you're like, right. I kind of find that really interesting.
As far removed and ancient we may think it is, the more and more I actually read it, I get the feeling that it's basically could be today. It's just a different way of saying, as I said, instead of I will kill you, it comes with a different words, and it's the same, basically the same intention. So it's extremely interesting. It's like a riddle, working on that riddle, working how, and then once everything jives together, as Sarah said, it's just magical, and that's what it is. It's magical. I don't think that really there is a bad performance of it. It's just most of the time, I feel most of the time people either don't spend enough time clearing out the intentions, or they would just not adhere to the rhythm that the play needs. And those are the pitfalls. Or if you try to be a director and you really sort of take it into a completely new land, new direction, then perhaps that could also be damaging to the intention of the integrity of the play. I mean, the perfect example is if you watch Roman Polanski's Macbeth. I mean, it's a beautiful visual spectacle. However, I think he destroys the play in and out of itself. It's just, it's a different expression of that play, which is beautifully, visually, very challenging. However, I think Shakespeare really provides for you to see all the images with words. Shakespeare provides for that. You don't need to have a camera for you to do a Shakespearean play. You do not need a camera.
Absolutely.
So, and again, it's very interesting. I went to see an exhibit, I'm sorry to on a tangent again, but went to see an exhibit by Van Gogh. Yeah, exactly. So when you see those things, you basically, same thing with those plays, when you read all these lines, sometimes they kind of go, oh, why would you say this long sentence,
Yeah.
If you step back, if you give the rhythm its due course, if you follow the intentions and you step back, all of a sudden there's the picture for you.
It's kind of exposition, he's doing the exposition.
Yes. That's why you don't need a camera. You just need somebody who really delivers the lines. And as I was saying to Sarah, bear in mind that the rumor is actually Richard Burton used to do Hamlet. That's what I was saying. Was it 2 bottles of vodka, 3 bottles of vodka a night? Incredible masters of the craft that nothing would stop them, not even being absolutely.
I mean, we're doing a reading, so it's one thing, but memorizing all of that takes some brain power, doesn't it?
That does.
There was a great Monty Python sketch, and he goes, they were asking, is it John Cleese that was doing it? It was a funny thing. He said, oh, yeah, well, now, what's the most difficult play? He said, oh, I think it's King Lear, because there's all these words, it's not just learning the words, it's also learning to put them in the right order.
Exactly. Yeah, but the artwork of Shakespeare is so rich and it fascinates so many people. I think that's really, and everyone tries to find their own approach in different mediums. And I think till this day, that makes it so outstanding, isn't it?
Yeah, definitely, 100%. And I think, like Emmanuel was saying, like we all have our characters that we resonate with and people we like, and those monologues stay with you and those characters stay with you, actually. Yeah. And what about reading Laertes? Because what character have you read in Hamlet? Like, because I know you've read Hamlet before.
I read Hamlet before, yes. I actually read Laertes a little bit, but we just did in that school, we did the monologue I had chosen the scene between the fencing match with Hamlet. And I played Laertes in that. But that was actually part of the training when you have to put action with words. I mean, that's a great thing about the theater, because, you do have somewhat baited spears as fences and rapiers, but you still need to be good enough to perform and come out clear, because you're going to be on stage and do the action. This is the challenge when you do it live as opposed to sitting in front of a camera. But so I had read a little bit of Laertes and Hamlet. Those are the only 2 characters I had read.
Okay.
And Hamlet is like the role, isn't it, really, for an actor? Everyone always loves that role.
Yes, it was. You know what, I could be a bit of an iconoclast. I've never had this feeling. Someone had said to me many years ago, oh gosh, I'm past the age I could play Hamlet. I said, I don't regret that. It hadn't been one of my top to perform Hamlet. I have no idea why. I just we're talking with Sarah. I think the characters is I find it. I mean, hopefully I don't sound as a know-it-all, but I find it a little bit too. No, it's not the character. I find them that, as I said to Sarah, I think the whole play is about like a karmic karma catching up with every single character in that play. And that's why I think every single character dies except for Horatio. All of them seem to have a sort of they do get involved with somehow on the dark side, and then that catches up with them. So Hamlet seems to be one of those things. And apart from everything else, it's just this sort of the man combating himself thing. Well, maybe it's not my thing. Who knows? I'm more into, I like to play Hotspur, play these sort of characters that are sort of, you will not. Yes, I wanted to chip in my 2 cents because I was thinking about it. So in terms of favorite plays, I think, again, I was going to say to my point that I think most of the plays are for actors because the characters really make up those plays. And to the point, like my wife would be very hard to persuade to go see a play, especially Shakespearean play. And even if it's going to be the most incredible performance, they are really sort of actors' showcases. If you really want to do, and people who really enjoy Shakespeare, they would go see it. But they are actors' showcases. These characters are, to do well, you have to have the training, you have to have the stamina, you have to have everything you have to have the right cast, So it's really, it's very interesting. It's a huge chunk to take on Shakespeare.
Yeah, it definitely is. But what I loved about our readings is just being able to collaborate with you guys and work with you guys, because it's it's fantastic.
It's incredible that with Zoom now we could just bridge the world. We have Switzerland.
Absolutely.
Yeah, it's amazing. And just to think we're not even in the same time zone, but we're just interacting in that moment.
And I feel like I learned so much, honestly, to see everyone, how they approach the characters, the different ways. I feel like I learned a lot just by watching and interacting with you guys.
It's fantastic to see other people's interpretations.
Exactly.
Anyone you don't have to be an actor. It's very interesting to even learn from a layman that would just read lines, because everyone just gets something from them, and it's incredible. But the language itself just really structures it. Again, I don't think the accent matters. I mean, nowadays, you can see that everyday people, and a lot of these. I mean, these people are not English to begin with. I mean, look at a lot of the histories, they're not English. Those people are not English. They were basically brought into an English language because, he was the one that tied it all together. But you can have any accent and read Shakespeare. Any accent, as long as you're clear.
Yeah.
Yes. I mean, don't Cleon, or let's say, for example, it's not Cleon, but a lot of these names are not English names. They're not English. Yes. A lot of the plays are taking place in old Albania, let's say Italy, all over the place. Why should they sound Anglo-Saxon? They don't have to. They don't have to sound Anglo-Saxon. You can have German accent, you can have French accent. Why not?
Yes. Yeah, definitely. And that's what I was saying to Ruth, Hamlet is set in Denmark.
Danish.
You
can have Danish accent. Why not?
Yeah, you can't worry about that. And I think it sounds really nice in different accents. I really like Shakespeare in different accents. It sounds awesome. Well, thank you so much. This has been brilliant.
Thank you for having me here. And let's do it more often. I'd love that. And just keep me in mind for Henry V.
Yeah, definitely. In our next episode, we will talk about the character of Hamlet's father, who appears as a ghost, played by Bill Jackson.